This week on Arizona Illustrated, ensuring the next generation of ranchers, nurturing the next generation of naturalists, capturing generations of landmarks by hand, and Steve Kerr from the vault. Welcome to Arizona Illustrated. I'm Tom McNamara. America's ranchers want to retire, but it's tough. The majority of the younger rural generation have left the ranch. They've forsaken their boots and chaps for an urban lifestyle that's easier and more lucrative, leaving their parents heirless. And with no one left to continue their legacy, these cowboys have to get creative or face the reality of losing what they love the most, their land. Well, enter Dennis Maroney, a southern Arizona rancher who had to get creative to save the land that he loves. The following is a production of the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences at the University of Arizona, presented by AZPM.
It takes a pretty impressive skill set to make a living and produce food on these landscapes. That skill set and that knowledge base is endangered. We are on the edge of a time when we might not see this way of life continue without doing some things to encourage young people and make it easy for them to come into this way of life.
We are running into so many landowners who are, as we say, aging out. You know, the kids are not interested in taking over the farm and the ranch. They're off in the city making other money, or making money. When you see a ranch being sold and you don't see someone coming in to work it, you see the landscape just really degrade. No one knows more about that landscape than Dennis does, and he can speak to it in such a way that you just really understand that it's more than land or soil or plants to him. It is really his family legacy.
I really think it's important in terms of a legacy to keep working landscapes working and available for future generations. So in our case, conservation easement is a fabulous tool. The money that we got out of the first easement was enough to pay off our mortgage, which is the right place to be when you talk about passing on a legacy to the next generation. You don't want to encumber the next generation with debt.
The broader picture, the work of land trusts that work with land protection is really just to do everything they can to help landowners find the tools that are available to protect these landscapes and keep them connected and keep them being able to be good stewards of the land and connecting protected landscapes. As a landowner, you have a lot of rights, and a conservation easement essentially removes the right to develop or the right to subdivide. And so you're left with the underlying land. You still own it. You can pass it on to your family members. You can sell it. But the conservation easement stays in place in what we call perpetuity, which is forever. The succession issues are really a big issue for our trust. The easements are not the be-all, end-all. At the end of the day, it is the landowners, the stewards of the land that are going to help keep these places intact.
I've known a lot of ranchers that didn't have a plan for succession for the ranch and just worked until they dropped dead. And I don't think that's a good idea. See, I recognize I can't do things that I could do 10 years ago or 20 years ago. It's just time to shift gears a little bit. One of the big problems is that I have 2 kids, and they said they weren't interested in working on the ranch. Deb and I are getting older, and we felt like we couldn't wait around for them to make up their minds. But in the meantime, we're working with another person who's really committed to doing this, and You know, to me, I mean, you work with who you've got to work with.
In the mornings, I'll come over and pick up my buckets of soaked corn that's been pre-measured out and soaked, and I will go into the pig pen and feed my pigs, and usually visit with them for a couple minutes, scratch them on the ears, and just kind of go about the day. I met Dennis and Deb Maroney at a Society for Range Management section meeting, and they told me what they do here on the 47 Ranch, and I just became friends with them. 6 years later, the timing was right, and Dennis and Deb asked me, hey, are you interested in the business at all? And that's when I seriously started considering actually moving to the ranch and becoming their apprentice employee.
We're consciously transitioning the company from something that was owned by Deb and I to something that's essentially an employee-owned company. Over time, she will continuously earn a larger share in the company and larger proportion of ownership. We're gonna hang a left, yeah. You get really wrapped up in a place emotionally and psychologically, and you invest a huge amount of human energy in the land and the livestock and the community, and it's pretty real. The cost of land, the cost of livestock, the cost of machinery and infrastructure to do the things that we do is huge. And removing the barrier associated with the financial impediments, probably the biggest challenge, and the one that requires farmers and ranchers who want to pass on their land to others to think outside the box. Young people are endowed with energy, with good health, with new ways of seeing things, great creativity, great problem-solving skills. I'm all for being kind of, you know, on the sidelines or in the background to provide advice and let them go for it, you know? I think it's great. And things that for me might be problems, the next generation may have solutions.
But at the end of the day, it's like, how many people actually want to do this? I think the resources to do it are here. The people just aren't there. So I'm kind of like, well, this is possible. You just have to be willing to work hard to do it.
In the end, Vanessa did not stay on with the 47 Ranch. However, Dennis Maroney has already arranged a similar apprenticeship with a young couple that hopes to be running the ranch themselves someday. Once facing a future that almost certainly included housing and commercial development, today the Las Cienegas National Conservation Area is more than 45,000 acres of rolling grasslands and woodlands. This protected area in Arizona's Pima and Santa Cruz counties is a perfect setting for nurturing and inspiring tomorrow's leaders.
Most of the kids, when I get them in my classroom, have never been out here. And you heard adults that hadn't been out here, didn't even know that part of the Sonoran Desert could be this green, this lush.
Kristen Albon is an environmental educator from Empire High School, and this is the Cienega Wetlands, part of the 42,000-acre Las Cienegas National Conservation Area.
And the other huge piece of it is that it truly is, it's our watershed. The watershed out here feeds to the Pantano, feeds to the Rialto, feeds to the Santa Cruz. So this is the heart of our groundwater and everything that we do in Tucson.
In 2000, President Bill Clinton designated Las Cienegas as a national conservation area, protecting this important and unique ecosystem.
I didn't really know this was a area and habitat in really this close to Tucson with the grasslands. It's hot, but it's good work.
Jacob Cooper is 16 and a student at City High in downtown Tucson. He's also one of 12 student leaders who are getting their hands dirty in this corner of the desert.
And then just wrap your hands around the thicker roots and yeah, it's like.
All right.
And try to keep it in an organized pile so that we can throw it outside of the fence. The problem with these is they suck the moisture out of the pond and make it dry up really fast, which is already a problem here in the desert.
It's the final day of the Youth Engaged Stewardship Program, which finds students, educators, and volunteers coming together to implement one of several restoration plans designed and led by the students.
The fanned, those are the cattail, and these are the ones we're trying to remove. We have to be careful with these. They're rhizomatous, which means the roots go out. So even if you're pulling them, you could still break the root. Like all these are connected by one root channel. So even if you leave the roots, they can still shoot up.
The YES program is a partnership between Ironwood Tree Experience, the Bureau of Land Management, Cienega Watershed Partnership, and educator Chris Inalbon.
So I was here like at 7 o'clock, and my husband's like, why? I mean, you heard everybody, you drug us out here. And I'm like, is everybody going to show? Is it going to happen at that moment? And it always comes out, and it's so beautiful and wonderful.
The Sonoran desert toad is actually a true toad instead of a frog, whereas bullfrogs...
The 3-year-old program seeks to educate and empower these young stewards of nature. They develop leadership skills, experience hands-on field work, and gain a broader, more informed awareness of the wild.
It's a little hot right now. I wish I was in shade, but I enjoy seeing the plants and seeing the birds and the bees and all the other little creatures.
This is Luca Valente's second year in the program. This year, he's acting as a mentor to the new students. He sees their work as a restoration, one that creates a new legacy for the Cienega wetlands and for future generations.
My interest is to see this place go back to what it was before, to reintroduce the plants, the native plants, to make sure that the invasive plants are out, and to make sure that this place stays a wetland.
This work will further protect threatened species like the native pupfish, the top minnow, and the Chiricahua leopard frog. But it came with a learning curve. 8 weeks earlier, the students didn't know bulrush from a cattail or milkweed from spike rush. That was the assessment phase, when the YES team was visiting potential project sites where their work could make a difference. One such site is the Sackatone Flats, where drought, soil erosion, and grazing cattle have taken their toll on the land.
Because if nothing's done, what might this area look like?
Students learn the history and nature of the area from environmental educators, scientists, and experts, like Dr. Jason Field from the University of Arizona's School of Natural Resources and the Environment.
They're realizing that it's much more integrated, so it goes up to the top of the canopy.
Students listened closely as he explained conditions in the area and what the possible solutions might be. The orientation and assessment allowed them to better understand the challenges and consider their approach.
The characteristics of this site is that it's
They took time to rest, reflect, and replenish.
I came out here to just experience something new.
If you're a mouse or a squirrel or a bat or a bird, you better watch out, because when you try to get down
Dennis
in the water,
Caldwell from the Frog Conservation Project shared his knowledge of the Chiricahua leopard frog and the non-native species that threatened them.
They used to be abundant throughout Cienega Creek and in this valley. It's a grassland species from southeastern Arizona.
They planted marsh marigolds around Cottonwood Frog Pond, beginning to learn the actual doing part of conservation and preservation.
It's larger than the giant water bug.
Next stop, Empire Gulch,
You need a net.
a riparian creek bed rich with water bugs and critters of all shapes and sizes. Another example of the dynamic and complex ecosystem that thrives here.
They look more like these two. And this one is actually a giant water bug.
Suzanne Druve is the executive director of Ironwood Tree Experience and one of the adult leaders of the YES program.
Other larvae. So this is a giant water bug, but it's more affectionately known as toe biters. Why is that, Allie?
They bite your toe.
They nip at your toes. Not really. Like that. And then his legs, he's just pushing off of my feet.
As they left the gulch, Christian stopped to try some wild mint. The assessment phase ended and the planning phase began.
I don't know how to spell it, right? It's fine.
Robert Rojo is a recent graduate of City High and will be attending the University of Arizona, where he plans to study mechanical engineering. He says he learned about the give and take of collaboration.
Being able to speak out and have your ideas and perspectives heard, as well as working with groups where, not just your own ideas seem really cool, but actually getting a different perspective and having the chance to work with one another and actually understand everyone's personalities.
For Robert, the teamwork, the leadership skills, and the environmental education are all part of a foundation he is building for his own legacy.
Well, my father and my mother are very proud of me, also my little brother. But I'm like the first in my family to graduate from high school and also going to college, so it's something really big.
18-year-old Allie Freiberg Landon also looks to the future, one where this work they are doing lives on.
I hope that we create a more resilient environment that allows for future growth so that youth volunteers in the future can improve upon our project.
On the last day in the Cienega wetlands, after weeks of planning and toil, the team can put its work into perspective.
This whole group of kids has been working hard all summer, and it feels good to get out here and support them. It all adds up to be a big deal, to really help save and preserve these places that may not otherwise be preserved.
Today, this contact is more important than ever. It sounds cliche, but they are really our future. And so getting these kids interested in all the life around us and seeing how everything is related is very important for our future.
The YES team came to this place for a project, but leave it with a band of newly forged environmental leaders, the new keepers of the land.
Their actions, their intelligence, their hands, their feet can make these differences, and that's important. And if I can hear a handful of kids say, "We did something," that's all I want. And to make it sustainable, knowing that they'll take that and move it on to other pieces of their life. Their vote, their action, their decision when they're being a consumer all makes a difference. And so it's that little bit of empowerment of, yes, I can make a change. And them understanding that they can create and do something. It's so powerful that they don't get in the classroom. Until they're hands-on it, they don't understand that they can create that change and that they have power. This day is that power.
Like what you see on Arizona Illustrated? Visit our webpage at azpm.org to watch and share videos from this episode. You'll also find stories from future programs, an easy way to submit your own story idea, an archive of past episodes of Arizona Illustrated, and you'll find everything you need to stay connected with public broadcasting in Southern Arizona. azpm.org. If you have ever walked down 4th Avenue, been to the Hotel Congress, or seen the Tucson mural at Stone and Speedway, chances are you have seen his work. Meet local artist Danny Martin, whose goal is to hand draw over 100 iconic Tucson landmarks on the spot.
Like a lot of people that do art, it started with drawing. I think most people that go into art start off because they were the weird kid who drew a lot. And I just never really grew out of being the weird person who drew a lot. My name is Danny Martin. I teach screen printing at Pima West. I moved out here 10 years ago to attend the University of Arizona. I got my master's in printmaking. I came from Alabama. I definitely consider Tucson my home. Well, I do like to draw every single day. Not just draw, but actually go out in public and draw. Just being in my environment and working, it's definitely the happiest that I ever am, is when I'm making objects.
Out here today drawing the Paul Bunyan statue, which is definitely a local icon. I'm working on my ongoing project, which is called Tucson Sketchbook, sometimes called Tucson Sketchbook Project. Doesn't really matter. I'm about 50 drawings in.
It's not random that I chose the buildings. The order in which I do them is somewhat random. It's mainly been older buildings, I would say. It's been mainly downtown buildings. A structure gets bumped up the list if it's something I think has a shorter shelf life. If it's like a business I think will be closing down, or a building that will be knocked down. The grill is always invoked as the linchpin, as the real jumping the shark moment that the downtown changed. Was the closure of the grill. It was an important meeting place for downtown culture, and it's not only that it's not there, but it literally burned down. For me, it did motivate me to not just complain or not just talk or reminisce, but to actively, at least for me, feel like I'm engaging in the dialogue of what Tucson is. All of these are done on the spot. It's really important for me to draw these on spot, because otherwise I'm kind of looking through someone else's filter. I really feel connected with the place while I'm drawing it. It actually makes it like I am a photographer or something like that, because I'm dictating how I see the place completely.
So this is an excuse to go all over town. Go all over town, talk to people, hang out, be outside, rather than just being inside or at a cafe looking at my iPhone, which I will be doing. Except now I'll be able to look at my Instagram, but oh yeah, I actually did do something part of my day.
I drew the taco borracho stand that was on 4th Avenue. I really liked that stand, but the owner passed away, and I drew it, and probably about 2 weeks afterwards it was just hauled off, and no one really knows where it was taken. There was an old fruit stand on 6th Avenue and Speedway that recently had to close down, and the couple had been there, I believe they said, since 1966. I didn't really do any documentation to where, even if I wanted to work from photos, like I couldn't, because I didn't take any documentation. But that's probably my number one, because it was, again, just like a small mom and pop business that very much just didn't quite fit in with the current cultural shift that's happening.
That thing always stood out to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of iconic, you know? Yeah, that's what I got so far. Hopefully it'll come into shape when I'm done.
Oh, it's there already. That's great. Oh my gosh, yeah.
Cool, thank you.
Wonderful.
Yeah, well,
nice
Danny.
I'm Doug.
Nice to meet you,
Yeah,
Doug.
nice to meet you too. Thank you. Nice to have you.
My parents are very, very supportive, and I feel very fortunate there was never any pressure to have a real career or a real job. And the only negative of that is the struggle to completely making up and figuring out how to make it work financially, which is another reason why I love Tucson, because I'm actually able to afford being a artist here. It's not that I'm making that much money, but that's a really supportive community that is very affordable and has affordable resources.
I'm not thinking about anything else. Bills I gotta pay, my next job I gotta do, even the next thing I'm gonna draw.
I'm sure deeper reasons than I'm aware of, that make me want to draw, but for me it's definitely my language. It's definitely my best foot forward as a human being, I know that. I'm 34, and years, you only have so many of them, obviously, and not just having them, but really being able to be yourself. What I mean is completely having all of your mental faculties, having all of your physical energies, and you're not guaranteed anything. So, I mean, I feel a real obligation not just to myself, but anyone who ever invested anything in me ever, to just do the most that I can. You know, like when I wake up in the morning, it's like it's a blessing. It's not an obligation.
Will basketball be a part of Steve Kerr's future? Hard to believe, but that was the question on the minds of many Tucsonans in 1988, as we see in this installment of From the Vault.
It came in the second round, the announcement that Steve Kerr had been selected by the Phoenix Suns. Kerr was a favorite son of sorts in Tucson, extremely popular with the fans and extremely effective for the team, especially those famous three-pointers.
I'll drill it in from three-point land.
Kerr was at his mother's home in Pacific Palisades, California, when he received the call from the Suns telling him he had been selected. We spoke with him moments later.
Everybody's happy that I got picked by Phoenix because you know, that with the NBA, the teams are spread out all over the country, and chances are you're not going to get picked by somebody near your home. But I was lucky, and so we're all very happy.
Well, I think that's great news for Steve and great news for the Phoenix Suns. I'm sure with the following that Steve has in the state of Arizona, not just in Tucson, but I think all over the state.
Coach Olson is busy this week with session 2 of his basketball camp. Would-be Steve Kerrs and Sean Elliott's are working on their skills, hoping to follow in the footsteps of those who shine with the Cats and those who move on to the NBA. 3 years ago, Steve Kerr said talk of a career for him in the NBA was premature. He said a career in coaching was more likely. But this year it was obvious that Kerr intended to play basketball as long as he could, anywhere he could. And of course the NBA was his first choice. McHale Center used to be Kerr's home court. Now it will be up the road. Coach Olson says he plans to take in some Suns games, and he says that drive to Phoenix will be a lot easier to take, knowing that at the other end he'll be watching Steve Kerr play basketball.
Thank you for joining us here on Arizona Illustrated. Next week, celebrating George Brookbank, the master of Southwest gardening. Meet the man who introduced Tucson to itself, Big Jim Griffith. Reminiscing with a Green Valley resident who beat the skins for Chet Baker. And traffic control 80s style from the vault. I'm Tom McNamara. See you next week.